Boston had a way of looking quiet when it was anything but. From the bay windows of the third-floor brownstone in South End, Elena Ward watched the morning fog curl along the rooftops. Beneath the hush of the city's rhythm, coffee shops opening, streetcars groaning to life, there was always something shifting underfoot. Elena had learned long ago that silence in this city didn't mean peace. It meant something was hiding. She turned from the window and sipped the last of her lukewarm coffee. Her laptop screen glared at her with an unfinished article titled, "The Disappeared, Where Do They Go?" It was supposed to be about systemic failure in the foster care system, a piece she'd pitched to keep her editor off her back. But she hadn't written a word in 3 days. Behind her, Vince Moretti leaned against the kitchen doorway, his shirt half-buttoned, his sleeves rolled. "You're doing that thing again," he said. Elena looked up. "Which thing?" "The thing where you stare at your laptop like it insulted your family." She almost smiled. Vince had a way of pulling levity into dark rooms. It was one of the things that surprised her most about him, how someone born and raised inside the folds of Boston's oldest crime family could carry so much light in his voice. "I'm not sure I know what to say anymore," she said, closing the laptop. "Everything I want to write would make me an enemy of someone. Then maybe it's worth writing." She glanced at him. Vince could say things like that because his enemies didn't operate on Twitter. They showed up at your door with silence and certainty. "Besides," he added, walking over and kissing the top of her head, "it's not like you've ever needed permission to tell the truth." Elena wanted to believe that was still true. 6 months ago, she had helped expose a human trafficking ring tied to a network of corrupt businessmen operating out of the Boston harbor. The article had saved lives, and made her a target. She hadn't published anything of that scale since. Not because she couldn't. Because she knew the cost. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Mark Sullivan, her editor at the Boston Ledger. "Call me. Now. Urgent." She answered immediately. "Elena," Mark said without pleasantries, "have you heard about Jade Monroe?" Her stomach turned cold. Jade had been one of the women rescued in the harbor sting, the youngest, just 23 at the time, tough as iron, but with eyes that never really stopped watching corners. "No," Elena said. "What happened?" "She's missing," Mark said. "Reported 2 days ago. No trace. Disappeared from a recovery shelter in Roxbury." Elena closed her eyes. "You think it's connected?" "I don't think in this city anyone just vanishes," Mark said. "I know you've been laying low, but—" "I'll look into it," she interrupted. "Don't assigner anyone else." A pause. "You sure?" "No," Elena admitted. "But I'm the only one who knows how to find her." After the call, Vince watched her quietly. "You're going to chase this," he said. She nodded. "Jade's gone. Do you want my help? You want your honesty? Do you think this could be retaliation?" He didn't answer right away. Vince moved to the window, his gaze on the skyline. "There are pieces of that operation we didn't touch. Ghosts. People who were never charged, never named. It's possible someone is tying off loose ends." "And I'm one of them," Elena said. His jaw tightened. "You were always more than that." She reached for her jacket. "Then I need to find her before someone decides otherwise." Later that afternoon, Elena drove to Roxbury in a car that wasn't hers, parked 3 blocks from the shelter, and entered through the back alley like she used to when visiting sources too scared to be seen with a reporter. The shelter manager, a middle-aged woman named Marie, met her at the back door. She was doing fine, Marie said, leading Elena into the office. No relapses. Kept to herself, but that's not unusual. When did she disappear? Night of the fundraiser. Thursday. Staff was stretched thin. Security cameras glitched. We thought she'd stepped out for air. Never came back. Police filed a report, but Marie hesitated. I think they believe she just left. But you don't. Marie pulled out a slip of paper from her desk. A folded note. Elena opened it carefully. 4 words. Scrolled fast, like it had been written in a hurry. He's back. I'm scared. Elena's heart dropped. She took a photo of the note and left through the back, her thoughts racing. She needed more. Surveillance footage, if it existed. Witnesses. Anyone who might have seen something. She didn't notice the dark SUV until she was halfway down the street. It was parked illegally, engine off, windows tinted too dark for Boston ordinances. As she passed, the back window lowered just a crack. "Elena Ward?" a male voice asked. She stopped, pulse spiking. "Who's asking?" The door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-40s, lean build, suit too clean for the neighborhood. "Spécial agent Sean Callahan, FBI." She kept her expression blank. "Don't you guys usually call ahead?" Callahan smiled thinly. "Not when we're making friends." "I already have enough of those." "Do they include the Moretti family?" he asked, voice calm but edged. "Because if so, you and I might need to have a longer conversation." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Is this about Jade Monroe?" "Jade Monroe is one of many," he said. "I believe there's a pattern you're not seeing. And I think your past involvement may have blurred some lines. I'd like to help you, unblur them." "I don't need help." He handed her a card. "You might. Eventually." She didn't take it. Callahan nodded and stepped back into the SUV. "Boston is changing, Ms. Ward. The shadows are getting smarter. And more of them look like daylight now." As the SUV pulled away, Elena realized she was shaking, not with fear, but with the familiar tremor of instinct. Something had been set in motion. And this time, she might not be able to control it. The next morning, Elena Ward found herself staring at a paused frame on her laptop screen. It showed the back entrance of the Harmony House Women's Shelter in Roxbury, grainy footage, the angle slightly skewed, the timestamp glitching in and out. But the figure in the lower left corner was clear. Jade Monroe. Dressed in a gray hoodie, head down, stepping into a black police cruiser with no visible number on the side. No lights. No sirens. It looked less like an arrest, more like a handoff. Elena rewound the footage again, studying the timestamp. 9:42 p.m., the night of the fundraiser. Jade wasn't taken by étrangère in the dark. She was escorted out, by someone who didn't want to be identified. Elena leaned back in her chair, heart thudding. She had spent the morning working contacts, social workers, former shelter volunteers, a city clerk who owed her a favor. Eventually, someone had slipped her a USB drive with that single clip on it. It wasn't enough to prove anything, but it was enough to ask better questions. She closed the laptop and stood, walking toward the kitchen. Vince was already there, shirtless, pouring coffee like he had no idea his name had just been dropped by an FBI agent the day before. "You sleep?" he asked without looking. "Not really." He passed her a mug. "What's going on in that head of yours?" She hesitated. "I think someone in law enforcement took Jade." Quietly. No paperwork. No questions. Vince set his mug down. "That's serious." "I know. Do you want me to look into it?" Elena May sighs. "I want you to tell me if this is connected to anything from the old network." Vince's jaw flexed. "If it was, I'd tell you." "Would you?" There was a pause. The kind that held weight. "I don't deal in that world anymore, Elena." "But it's still dealing with you," she said. He looked away. "Jelle ask around." Quietly. "Thank you." Later that afternoon, Elena sat alone in a corner booth at the Penny Tap, a bar in Somerville frequented by off-duty cops and city officials trying not to be seen. She'd arranged to meet someone, an old contact, a former Boston PD officer named Rudy Dempsey who had retired early under suspicious circumstances. He arrived 15 minutes late, wearing a Red Sox cap and sunglasses like a man trying too hard not to be recognized. "You're lucky I still read your stuff," he said as he slid into the booth. "I'm lucky you still owe me," Elena replied. Dempsey ordered a beer, took a long sip, and leaned in. "What do you want?" "Jade Monroe," Elena said. "Disappeared last Thursday. Picked up by an unmarked cruiser. I want to know who took her." Dempsey scratched his beard. "Why do you think I'd know that?" "Because she was escorted out, not kidnapped. That takes coordination. Access. Someone from the inside." Dempsey didn't answer right away. Then he pulled out a napkin and wrote down 2 initials, HK. "She's in Worcester," he said. "Highview Correctional, one of those private rehab centers with a contract through the state. Elena frowned. That's not a holding facility. That's... Exactly. It's off the books. But still funded. Who's HK?
Dempsey stood.
Someone you don't want to meet. But someone you should write about. He left before she could ask more. By sundown, Elena was back in her apartment, digging through public records and budget allocations for the Department of Corrections. Highview Correctional appeared nowhere in official documents. But there were large unaccounted-for payments to a company called Holden Kessler Consulting, based in Lexington. HK. She kept going. Cross-referenced court filings. Found 3 lawsuits that had been quietly settled, families of individuals held at Highview, all claiming abuse, isolation, and involuntary detainment. All gagged by NDA agreements. Jade had been sent into a legal black hole. A knock at the door snapped her out of focus. She checked the peephole and opened it. Samir was standing there, hoodie up, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. You said to bring what I found in person, he said. And trust me, this is not email safe. She let him in. Samir dropped into a chair and opened his laptop. I did some digging into our new friend, Agent Callahan. The guy's clean, on paper. No complaints, commendations, even a few anti-trafficking awards. But he's also connected to Holden Kessler. Quietly. He was part of a task force 5 years ago that recommended outsourcing state rehabilitation programs. And guess which company got the pilot program?
Elena's blood ran cold.
Samir kept going. I also found some redacted memos, internal FBI stuff. Callahan's been pushing to reopen the Moretti files. He thinks you're a conduit. That Vince is using you to rebuild something. Elena stood. That's ridiculous. Vince hasn't touched anything since. It doesn't matter what's true, Samir interrupted. It matters what they can prove. Or make people believe.
She sat down slowly.
He's going to use me to get to Vince. Samir nodded. And Jade was probably his warning shot. That night, Elena didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and listened to the silence between the headlines, the stories that didn't make it to print, the names that never got written, the lives erased by clean paper trails and polite language.
In the morning, she met with Vince in the garden behind the brownstone.
He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept either. I found her, she said. She's at a facility run by Holden Kessler. Same group Callahan is tied to. I asked around, Vince replied. Dante confirmed it. One of our old rivals, Delgado, has been moving funds through Holden Kessler. Jade must have seen something. That's why they pulled her.
Elena exhaled.
So it's both.
All enemy and the new corruption. Boston never change, Vince said.
But we can't play the old game, she replied. No guns. No threats. We fight this with what I have. Your words. My proof. He studied her. If you publish this, they'll come for you. They already are. Vince paused. Then I'll make sure they don't reach you. Elena shook her head. Not this time.
No shadow.
No favors. If we're going to bring them down, it has to be in daylight. He reached for her hand. Then we stay in the light. Together. And for the first time in days, Elena allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, truth could be louder than silence. Elena Ward stood in the hallway of the Boston State House, the marble floors echoing each step she took. Behind the heavy oak doors of room 312, Marisol Vega, Massachusetts District Attorney, was waiting. The last time they had spoken, it had been over a courtroom lunch table, when Elena was covering a domestic violence trial Vega had prosecuted without mercy. That conversation had ended with Vega saying, "Sometimes the law works, sometimes we work the law."
Elena hadn't forgotten it.
Inside the office, Vega motioned her in without standing. The DA was dressed in a charcoal suit, glasses perched at the tip of her nose, and a pile of manila folders stacked on her desk like miniature barricades. I thought you'd come sooner, Vega said.
You knew I'd come.
I read your last 3 articles. The fact that you've been quiet for 6 months told me something louder than anything you've written. Elena sat across from her. I have proof that a federal agent is coordinating with a private facility to detain civilians without due process. One of my sources was taken. Vega tapped a pen against her folder.
Aldan Kessler. Elena blinked.
You know it. I've been tracking their contracts for months. State funding. No oversight. Legal limbo. The problem is they're protected, deeply. Political ties. Lobbyists. And yes, a few helpful agents who think due process is optional.
Sean Callahan.
Vega didn't confirm. But she didn't deny it either. I need your help, Elena said. No. You need protection, Vega corrected. You're standing between a man with a badge and the truth he thinks belongs to him. That's not a safe place to be. I've been in worse.
Not like this.
This isn't cartel territory. This is a boardroom with bulletproof windows and handshakes that kill.
I'm not backing down.
Vega finally leaned forward, her voice dropping. Then understand this. If you come at Callahan, you'll need more than a story. You'll need a body count. That night, Elena typed until her fingers ached. Notes. Timelines. Names. Every detail Samir had found. Every lawsuit she had unearthed.
The footage from the shelter.
Jade's note. Everything went into a folder marked Jade, HK, Callahan. She didn't publish it. Not yet. She needed a trigger, an undeniable connection. And she knew exactly who to pressure. Dante Moretti was waiting in the back office of an Italian restaurant in East Boston, sipping a glass of scotch like it was part of a photo shoot. He was Vince's cousin, once poised to inherit part of the Moretti network, before the family's influence waned and Vince began the slow, painful effort of dragging them out of the shadows. Elena had never trusted Dante. He smiled too easily and listened too little. I didn't expect you to show up without your bodyguard, Dante said as she entered. I'm not here for protection, Elena said. I'm here for answers. That sounds like a Vince thing to say. She ignored the jab and sat. I know you've been meeting with Callahan.
Dante's smile froze.
I know you gave him details about Vince's past operations. And I know you're playing both sides to keep yourself clean. He didn't deny it. He didn't have to. What do you want? He asked, voice flatter now.
Tell me what you traded.
And I don't go to the press with your name. Dante chuckled, but it was thin.
You're bluffing.
Elena opened her phone. A single photo appeared. A grainy image of Dante stepping into a federal building 3 nights earlier.
Callahan was holding the door.
Dante stared at it for a long moment. Then he sighed. He wants to take Vince down. He doesn't care about you. You're a means to an end. He thinks if he pressures you hard enough, you'll flip. I won't.
Doesn't.
He's building a case. Real or not. Enough pressure, something will crack. Is Jade part of that pressure? She saw too much. About the shelter.
About Delgado. Delgado? Elena's briscocked.
He's back. Quietly. Money's coming through real estate deals and non-profits. Holden Kessler's just one arm. Elena stood. You just gave me what I needed. Dante drained the rest of his drink.
Do me a favor. Don't tell Vince it came from me.
She paused. If he finds out, it won't be because of me. The next day, Elena returned to Vega's office with everything. The photo. The footage. The names.
The money trail. The connection to Delgado. Vega listened in silence.
When Elena finished, she simply said, now we can begin. Meanwhile, Callahan was not idle. That same afternoon, Vince received an unexpected visitor. A police detective from the organized crime unit, holding a sealed subpoena. I suggest you read this carefully, the detective said. We've reopened the Moretti file. Allegations of racketeering, conspiracy, laundering. Might want to talk to a lawyer. Vince didn't flinch. He waited until the detective was gone, then locked the front door and pulled out his phone.
Samir.
I need you to do something. Name it. Dig into Delgado. Find out how deep he's in with Callahan. You want the real story or the legal version? Both. Later that night, Elena found Vince in the garden again. He looked calm, but she knew better. "They're coming for you," she said. "I know. You should leave." "No. That's what they want. To scare me."
Tu isolat you. She stepped closer.
"They'll arrest you. Then they'll have to do it with something real."
There's nothing real left, Vince. Just ghosts and accusation.
"Then we fight ghosts with light." She nodded. "Then I'm publishing." "You're sure?" "I have Vega. I have Samir. I have you."
Dette Saléinide. Vince hésitated.
"If you burn this bridge, there's no coming back." Elena took his hand. "Then we walk forward. Together." The story went live the next morning. The System in the Shadows, How One Woman Was Silenced to Keep a Network Alive, by Elena Ward. The piece was explosive. Names.
Documents.
Connections.
Elena hält nothing back.
Callahan was not named directly, but the implications were clear. Holden Kessler's role was undeniable. Lawsuits followed. News outlets picked it up. Vega announced a formal investigation. Within 48 hours, Jade Monroe was released from Highview. She was alive. Bruised. But alive. And Elena knew, this was just the beginning. As the headlines rolled in, she returned to her brownstone to find an envelope taped to her door. Inside, a single sentence typed on white paper.
You just made yourself the story.
She read it twice. Then she went inside, locked the door, and opened a new document on her laptop. Its title, Chapter 2. Elena Ward hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours, but her adrenaline wouldn't let her stop. The story had detonated across local newsrooms and social media like a slow-burning fuse reaching a powder keg. Articles were quoting her. Talk shows were dissecting every paragraph. And now, finally, someone had started listening. The Massachusetts Office of the Inspector General launched an immediate inquiry into Holden Kessler Consulting and its relationship with private correctional facilities. The governor's office issued a statement pledging full transparency. But not everyone was celebrating. The Boston Ledger received a subpoena, demanding all internal communications related to the article. Elena's name was plastered across online forums accusing her of criminal collusion. She received anonymous messages on her burner phone, some taunting, some threatening, one just an image of a noose.
And then there was Callahan.
He didn't hide anymore. 2 days after her article went live, he appeared at the Boston Ledger's front desk with 2 other agents. Calm.
Civil. Smiling.
"I'd like a word with Elena Ward," he said. "As a courtesy." Mark Sullivan intercepted him. "She's unavailable," Mark said. "And unless you have a warrant, you can leave." Callahan handed him a business card. "She's making dangerous enemies, Sullivan. Some of them wear suits. You do well to remind her which lines not to cross." Mark didn't blink. "She already knows. And she's not the one crossing them." Back at her apartment, Elena locked the door and double-checked the windows. Samir had installed a new VPN, encrypted her files, and set up off-site backups. Vega had told her to stay quiet, to let the legal process play out. But Elena knew better. This wasn't a courtroom fight. It was a public one. And she needed to keep the pressure on. She drafted a follow-up article that night, shorter, sharper, more direct. It named names. Not just Callahan's allies, but donors to Holden Kessler, local politicians who had accepted campaign funds, judges who had ruled favorably in gagged settlements. Before she published, she called Vince. "I'm escalating," she said. He didn't ask what that meant. He only said, "I'll be ready." But Vince had his own problems. The Moretti name was being dragged through mud again. Dante's betrayal had surfaced. He'd fled Boston after someone leaked his meetings with Callahan to the press. Old rivals resurfaced, hoping to reclaim territory Vince had quietly withdrawn from years earlier. The family wasn't just under scrutiny, it was under siege. And in the middle of it all, Vince received a message of his own. It was left in the glove compartment of his car, an unmarked manila envelope containing photographs of Elena entering and leaving Vega's office, the Ledger's building, the shelter in Roxbury. Each image was time-stamped, labeled, and organized with disturbing precision. A note was clipped to the final photo. You can't protect her forever. Vince didn't bring the envelope to Elena. Not yet. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't want fear to decide her next move. Elena, meanwhile, was preparing for the inevitable. Vega had warned her that the State Ethics Board was reviewing a formal complaint against her, citing questionable journalistic practices and potential collusion with criminal elements. In other words, they were coming for her credibility. She could survive legal threats, but if she lost her reputation, she'd lose everything. That's when she received the message. A direct email. No subject.
No sender.
Just one sentence. If you want to win, make them speak. Attached was a zip file. Elena opened it in a secure environment. Inside were audio files, 7 in total. Recordings from internal meetings at Holden Kessler. Men and women speaking casually about quotas, detainment protocols, the manipulation of mental health assessments to justify confinement. One voice was unmistakably Callahan's. Ward thinks she's a savior. She's a liability. If we don't contain her, Moretti will. One way or another, she'll be silenced. The recordings were damning.
Haine dangereux.
Elena sent them to Vega immediately. You can't publish those, Vega said. They're illegally obtained. Then subpoena them, Elena replied. Use them in court. Just don't bury them. I won't. But you need to be prepared. If this goes to a hearing, they'll rip your life apart. I'm already living in pieces. 2 days later, the ethics board called a hearing. Elena appeared before 7 members seated behind a long mahogany bench in a government building not far from Beacon Hill. The room was filled with journalists, attorneys, politicians, and cameras. Vince wasn't allowed inside, but he waited outside with Mark and Samir.
Inside, Elena stood alone.
The board's counsel opened the proceedings with a rehearsed list of accusations: improper sourcing, conflict of interest, abuse of public trust. Then they asked Elena if she had anything to say in her defense.
She stepped forward, unsteady, voice clear. You accuse me of crossing lines.
Of using methods you don't approve of. But you never ask why those methods were necessary.
A murmure stirred in the gallery.
For months, I followed protocol. I filed FOIAs. I asked questions. I sought answers through official channels.
Endiwas mais oui silence.
She held up a folder. These are the stories of 15 individuals detained in facilities operated by Holden Kessler. None of them were given legal representation. Most were held without cause. Some were injured. One is missing. She placed the folder on the table. You don't have to believe me. But I'll ask you this, what would you have done if you'd seen what I've seen?
If you knew what I knew?
Would you have waited for permission, or would you have acted? Silence filled the room. She looked at each board member.
I didn't break the truth.
I exposed it. When the hearing adjourned, the crowd outside was waiting. Some cheered. Some shouted accusations. Elena pushed through them, ignoring the cameras, until she found Vince. He didn't say anything. He just handed her the manila envelope. She opened it. Her face went pale. They've been following me, she whispered. They want you to be afraid, Vince said. They want you to question everything. She looked at him.
Are you afraid?
He hesitated. Yes. But not for me. That night, Elena received a call from Vega. We're filing charges, Vega said.
Against Callahan. Against Aldan Kessler.
We have enough. Elena didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She just closed her laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the silence. Because even victory, when it finally arrived, didn't sound like triumph. It sounded like breath. 2 weeks had passed since the charges were filed. The fallout was immediate. The FBI announced an internal review of Agent Sean Callahan's conduct. Holden Kessler's state contracts were suspended indefinitely. Several executives resigned within 48 hours. Public protests erupted outside the Massachusetts State House, calling for reform in the private correctional industry. Even national outlets began picking up Elena's story, quoting her article word for word. Elena Ward had done what few believed possible. She had made the silence speak. But victory had come with a price. The Boston Ledger suspended her, citing ongoing legal complications. Sponsors had threatened to pull funding unless the paper distanced itself from her work. Mark Sullivan, her longtime editor and mentor, resigned in protest 2 days later. "You wrote the truth," he told her as they sat across from each other at the now empty office. "But this city still punishes those who tell it." Elena nodded. "I didn't expect anything less." The damage didn't stop there. Elena's personal life had become a battleground. News vans parked outside her apartment day and night. Strangers sent threats disguised as questions. Old colleagues avoided her. Online articles dissected her past, questioning her motives, even her mental health. She had exposed a machine. And now the machine wanted her dismantled. Vince urged her to leave Boston, at least for a while. "They won't stop until they feel they've silenced you," he said one night as they sat in the small garden behind their building, the city humming like static beyond the trees. "I'm not afraid," she replied. "I know you're not," he said. "But I am. For you." She reached for his hand. "I won't run. But I'll step back." "What does that mean?" "It means I'll write. But on my own terms." And so she did. Elena packed up her apartment, said goodbye to the few friends who still stood beside her, and moved into a small rental house 2 towns over, where no one knew her name. There she started over, not with another article, but with something slower, deeper.
A Digital Journal.
A long-form platform she built herself. Its name, the silence between the headlines. No ads. No sponsors. No algorithms. Just words. Just truth. She wrote about Jade, who was now living in Vermont, trying to rebuild her life far from the shadows of the city. She wrote about the other victims whose names never made the news. About the subtle forms of control no one wanted to talk about. The judges, the lobbyists, the systems that silenced without ever shouting. People began to read. Quietly at first, then steadily.
Some sans letters.
Others sent their stories. And slowly, the noise around her began to shift. It didn't disappear, but it changed tone. She was no longer just a target. She was a symbol. Vega continued the fight in court. The hearings became public. Testimonies revealed the breadth of the corruption Elena had hinted at. Delgado, the man behind the curtain, was indicted on multiple counts of conspiracy and financial fraud. Callahan resigned before his trial began. He never apologized. Elena didn't expect him to. One morning, months after it all began, she received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sentence. "You did what we couldn't."
No name.
Just the weight of those 7 words. That night, she drove back into the city for the first time in weeks. She parked near the Charles River and walked to the old footbridge where she and Vince had once talked about leaving Boston behind.
The lights reflected off the water like fractured star.
The skyline stood still, unaware of the battles fought in its name. Vince was already there, waiting. "You look different," he said. "So do you," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the river's quiet murmur. "I miss the quiet," Elena said. "There's quiet," Vince answered.
And then there's azure.
"What you did was make sure the world remembered. I didn't think it would cost so much. Truth always does." She looked at him. "And what now?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper. She took it.
The headline read:
Private prisons bill passes. Massachusetts bans state contracts with for-profit facilities. She read it twice. "I didn't think they'd do it," she whispered. "You gave them no choice." They walked along the bridge until the wind became too cold. Back at the car, Vince paused.
"You could still leave, you know."
"No one would blame you."
"I'm not leaving."
"Then we stay. In the open."
"No more shadow."
"No more shadows," she agreed. In the weeks that followed, Elena continued to write. Not for fame.
Not for redemption.
But for the people no one else would write for. She published a piece titled The Cost of Telling the Truth, in which she detailed every step of her journey, not as a hero, but as someone who had made mistakes, taken risks, and stood alone when no one else would. The piece went viral. Students shared it in journalism classes. Survivors wrote in to say thank you. A publisher offered her a book deal. She declined. This story belongs to the public, she told them. Not to a shelf. One morning, months later, she walked into a cafe near Cambridge. She ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. The barista, a college-aged girl with nervous energy, approached her shyly. "Are you Elena Ward?" she asked. Elena nodded. "I just wanted to say, your story made me change my major. I want to study investigative journalism." Elena smiled. "Then make it count." The girl returned to the counter, beaming. Elena sipped her coffee. She didn't need applause. She just needed to know someone was still listening. She opened her notebook and wrote the next headline. "Truth doesn't end at the verdict." And beneath it, the first line.
When the système forgeait, we remembait.
She looked out the window, the city alive beyond the glass. Boston hadn't changed. But maybe now, it had begun to listen. And Elena Ward had never stopped speaking.